is Howard Jones. I'm 55, just retired. I was born and brought up in Liverpool in England, and I came here as a young man in 1976. And the first place I came to Tasmania was actually at Scamander, and then moved down here as a first year teacher 4 years later and lived here ever since. My ties to the coast and the sea, it's my raison d'etre, it's my being. It's what I do recreationally, it's what I do for fun, it's what I've done for work. I just can't imagine living anywhere but the coast. And when I go fishing up to the lakes and places like that, I feel away from where I belong. I grew up in a port city when there's no wind. If I'm in a place where there's no wind or sound of the surf, it's strange. Every time I come back to the coast and I'm driving down the St Mary's Pass, there's a little place on the St Mary's Pass, you can look through the trees and you first see the surf line. And I always think, I'm home. And I think it happens to a lot of people who live here, that little patch as you come down, you'll see it when you're going home. You look down, I'm home. And it's still 30 minutes from home, but you just see the line of breakers, and that's it. As a teacher, an enormous amount of the work that I do with kids is to do with the coast and the marine environment. I'm renowned as a person to bring dead stuff to. If kids find stuff on the beach, they always seek out Mr. Jones, and I get albatrosses with tags and we send the tags away, or they bring me porcupine fish that have been thrown up in the drift line, or they bring an unusual species in, or they catch something, they always come and seek me out. And that's my professional life. If I've got a spare moment, I'll be fishing or diving or swimming. I'll run down the road here and I'll swim in Beauty Bay for exercise. That's 2 minute run down and off the jetty and into the bay and swimming in Beauty Bay. If I want to go a bit further, I'll drive out to Binalong and swim Binalong off the beach, go for a snorkel, catch some abs. In the past I've got involved in the Great Abalone Bake Off, where we all have our recipes, and the various divers, recreational and commercial, all compete to see who's got the best recipe and who cooks the best abalone. It's just every part of what I do and think about is to do with the coast and fishing, from my freezer to my bedroom with my fishing rods out to my shed that's built to store my boat. I just cannot imagine not being tied to the coast. It's just what I am. If people ask me what you're doing, I'm either going to be in the water, on the water, or under the water. It's just what I do. It's pretty special. It's hidden away. It takes a bit of an effort to get here. I went and worked in Europe in 2000, and then thought seriously about living over there again. But I came back, my son's 21st birthday, and I came back to the coast in early January, and I hadn't a house or anything. I'd sold my house and it was all gone. And I came back and I went to Genera Beach, which is in the Bay of Fires. And it was in late afternoon, and there was no one on the beach, and I just walked into the waves and just was lolling around in a metre swell, and it was about 32 degrees. There wasn't a person on the beach, there were just the birds and the sea, and I couldn't believe I'd ever left the place. And I realised then that yeah, it's nice places to visit around the world, but as a place to live, it's got everything that I need, and it's just a place that I want to spend the rest of my life and just doing what I do. It's just a great place to be, and it's just hidden away enough so it's a big effort for people to get here. It seems unspoiled. It seems unspoiled. There have been lots of changes, and there are signs that the place is changing, but compared to anywhere else in the world I've been, to come here and to walk the beaches, you get selfish and you think, oh, there's someone else on my beach. It's ridiculous, but here's a beach that runs from Beaumaris to Scamander, and for 3/4 of the year, every time you go there, there's no one on it, and then you get annoyed in the first day in November when someone else is on your beach. I love that. I spent time in Ireland, and I tried to find the same thing. I actually drove to Donegal, and I found an isthmus that ran out into the Atlantic Ocean, and I thought, can I find something like St Helens? Can I find something like the East Coast? And saw the map, and there was just this long piece of sand that went into the ocean. I thought, well, I'll go and have a look at that. And I drove my car down there and scrambled across some rocks, and there was a series of rocks and little coves and then sandy beach. And I just jumped over the rocks and plunged down onto the beach, and there's just a metre high tide line of rubbish and detritus from the ocean, fish boxes, light globes, plastic containers, thongs, and I had to climb over it. And then that was a little tiny beach, and then I ran onto the next headland, and I'm just really disappointed because I was going to collect some mussels or something to eat. And the headland was, pristine, rocks, rock pools. Then went down the next little cove, little beach, same thing, big tide line of rubbish. Never see that here. Never see it. It's just, this is pristine. We're lucky that other people's rubbish doesn't drift up, doesn't wash up here like it does in Ireland, where they get everyone. Probably what's come out of New York ends up on the west coast of Ireland, and it literally was climbing over rubbish. This place is largely unspoiled. The changes are coming. It's getting harder and harder to find some of the places and access some of the places. If you go to the gardens, you'll see a sign that says, "We will build your mansion here," right at the gardens. We used to drive in there through a gate, and from the farm, with the farm's permission, we'd plunge down over, bounce through the paddocks, and we'd go off the rocks and have a snorkel. There's a fence there now and 4 or 5 big flash houses. Won't be much longer before there's a line of houses and a fence, and so they'll appropriate the foreshore, because you won't be able to get to that little patch of foreshore because they put their fence on the front of their house, and so is the neighbour and the neighbour and the neighbour, and suddenly you got no access to somewhere you went to for years. And that worries me. There have been Aboriginal families who've come down from Pyangana, and every year they would go there, and they set up their tents and their caravans in November long weekend, opening the crayfish season. Okay, that's all been closed up now. They've lost their access to something they've been doing for, I don't know, their parents would have been doing it. But if you go, you can actually walk further up the coast and you can go to a preserved Aboriginal site. So people make an effort to preserve things, but we're losing things along the way, and that's a little bit sad. People are going to love it to death. And they want their own little patch of it, and sadly I think in the way we look at the world, if I get my little patch of something, it means that I want my little patch of something, and you can't have it, and I will put up my fence, I will put up my markers to say, this is my little patch of paradise. And you're actually destroying, people are actually destroying why they first came here. And if I get onto a bandwagon about this, you go to Binalong Bay now, and as you drive around the corners of Binalong Bay, all those nice flash houses on the foreshore, they'll all say, property rental, So this is where people come down for their shacks and their mansions, and they'll come down to their shacks because they love Binalong Bay. They've come down, and they might have come down here as a child and seen it. They want their nice little shack on the front overlooking the beautiful beach at Binalong Bay and the white sand and all the rest of it. But then they bugger off for 9 months of the year. They might come back a week or two. Meanwhile, what made Binalong Bay special was the old fellas who were fishing there and all the locals who were there and the kids on the beach and all the rest of it. They can no longer afford to be in those little shacks that were there now, that have been knocked down to build the mansions. So bit by bit, we're just losing the qualities that these wealthier people recognised and wanted to have, and in having them, they're changing the qualities and denying it to the locals who no longer can afford to live there now. That saddens me, and I think I have a pretty good perspective on that, having travelled and come from a country where places have been locked up for the wealthy people. One of the best things about living down here is it has been freely accessible to everybody. Anyone can go on the beach. You ever heard of a private beach in Australia? Certainly don't exist in Tasmania. You go to Europe and there are private beaches, you pay to get on the beach. And then you find a spot big enough to put your deck chair on or lay your towel out. It's nothing like that here. You just can't have a long walk, put your surf rod in and stand there. There might be someone 50, 60 metres away, and that's just brilliant. And the surf rod might be a metaphor, for the houses. Just as the houses come, you can't get there and surf fish anymore. Alright, it's going to lose the trade that we have. It's people. It's just increased traffic, increased technology. In the time that I've been here, once upon a time, if you had a boat with paint on, it was pretty flash. There weren't very many people who had painted boats. And now you see the boats that are going out every day, and they're 6 metres long, and they've got all the technology you can imagine on coloured sounders. They've even got potholders, and there's a relentless pressure on the place that there never was before. That's not only the fishing, it's just the use of the place. I went yesterday to Swimcat Beach because a friend of ours was having a 50th birthday party, and they decided to camp on Swimcat Beach in the dunes behind the beach. And initially they'd planned to go to North Cozy, but when they got to North Cozy there were so many grey nomads there they couldn't actually camp there, so they ended up at Swimcat. When I'm fishing in my boat and I'm fishing through the Bay of Fires, going out of Binalong and heading past Swimcat, once upon a time, phrase again, once upon a time, 20 years ago, once you'd gone past Christmas, there'd be no sign of any human occupancy anywhere along it. Doesn't matter what time you go now, you see the big white Winnebagos all the way, every 20 metres or so along the whole of Swimcat Beach, the back of Swimcat Beach, you see these great white Winnebagos. And the area used to get a chance to recuperate over winter. It's all grey podzol soil, really easily blown, but over the winter the few grasses have come back in, tie it down again. Now it's just a dust bowl because there's Winnebagos going over it all year, and the toilets that have been put in there are probably full all year. We went for a walk between Swimcat and over the sand dunes behind a rocky headland onto Generic Beach, and every track had been used as a latrine, which is really disappointing because people are camping in this area now constantly, and so they walk from the Winnebag, 20 metres or so, and they just find a nice little sand track going into the dunes, and they go up there and they do their business and then they come back. They might do that for a week, and so they've got a week of toilet paper and stuff there, and that was disappointing last night. We just wanted a nice quiet walk, and we had to keep coming back down the tracks and find another one, so we didn't have to walk through someone's latrine. So it's just pressure of people, and I can't be selfish because I know why I wanted to be here, and people want to be here too. And these people love just camping, the free camping, and coming here and just camping behind the beach and then just walking over the edge and putting their surf rod down and coming back and sipping their Winnebago and having their beer or whatever. It's a wonderful thing to do, but I don't think they're anywhere near aware of the damage that they're doing. They wouldn't see the number of people being there all year. They come here and see what a beautiful, quiet place is, but once upon a time they were empty places. And every now and again a fire gets away, which is a pity. People are loving it to death. And then we don't even think about the penguins that are there. People wouldn't even realise. As you step over that bank and onto the beach, if they only knew, just underneath that bank there's all the penguin burrows. And they don't get a break anymore, They'll come in, they've been fishing in the ocean all day and they want to come in and feed their chicks or whatever at the end of the day. And there's people walking on the beach and there's Winnebagos parked there and there. I just wonder what happens to the penguins. I think people need to learn about their environment, and a lot of the damage is caused simply by lack of awareness and ignorance. I remember it was only a few years ago at Binalong Bay there was some hooded dotterels nesting, and so the Parks and Wildlife came and they put wire netting around the area to protect where the birds were nesting. There's a beautiful flat area between the lagoon and the beach, a beautiful area, and a busload of people came down and they thought that would make a fantastic place to play cricket, because obviously the ball wouldn't go into the lagoon and the ball wouldn't go into the ocean. It's just sheer ignorance. They meant no harm, and I think a lot of the time that's it. People walking their dogs on the beach, they choose to walk right on dark. Well, there's no worse time to walk your dog on the beach, because the poor little penguins are lying up there and the chicks are in the burrows, and you get people walking, what a wonderful sunset last night, and they have no idea of the trauma they might cause just walking their dog along the beach. And you talk to Parks and Wildlife about it and they say, well, we have to, it is an iconic beach, people want to walk on it, we will save and we will preserve other beaches. And so we're actually selecting, and I know people are working on it, we're actually selecting the areas that we try and keep as special, and other places sadly just get sacrificed to the greater good, or to bring in the money and the tourists for the economy. But what will happen to the penguins? I don't know. That's another metaphor, I guess, for the loss of what we had. I can remember my first day as a diver in this state, and it compares very unfavourably to my experiences as a youngster. As a youngster, it was in the Mersey River in Liverpool, you know, where oh, it's a bit rude, but I'll go with it. Where the most common thing found on the beach were condoms. Okay, used condoms. To come to a pristine environment. I can remember my first day, a friend of mine took me to Bluestone Bay in Freycinet, and he used a compressor, and he was a diver, an experienced diver, Reg Walling, and they suited me up and they put the regulator in my mouth and told me what to do, and I hopped into Bluestone Bay and just sank to the bottom, and to be sitting down on the bottom breathing air in 10 metres of water. I'm just sat there squatting on the bottom, and there's just fish swimming past me, and I'm sitting amongst the kelps and the sponges. It just blew me away. It's stuff that I dreamt about as a boy. I dreamt about being a marine biologist, visiting Port St Mary's in the Isle of Man, and going and look at the flatfish in the tanks, and yeah, I'd love to be involved in learning about the marine environment. To be sitting there in Bluestone Bay, crystal clear waters, looking up and seeing the interface of the air and the water and the silverness of that, and it was just brilliant. And from that day forward, I knew I was just going to be a diver. You know, whether it be snorkeling or on air, on tanks, whatever, it was fantastic. In those days, I was always taken. People were so generous with their time and their facilities and their resources. Always taken by people to go diving, and we were always, in those days, there was a bit of rape and pillage. We were always looking for food. We were always looking for crayfish, hunting crayfish and abalone. And it still got me. It hooked me then, and to go hunting for crayfish. Either be snorkeling is the pinnacle of doing it, but to be hunting crayfish on air is just fantastic. To be wrestling them out of the holes and fooling them and all the rest of it. I don't even like eating crayfish that much, but to be doing that hunting, and I realise the damage that I've caused over my lifetime, but it still gets me going. To be diving down and looking in crevices on the bottom, in amongst the crayweed, and then looking in and seeing the two feelers just that have registered my presence, and to see them and then to try and catch that crayfish with your bare hands and pull him out of his hole. Now sometimes that's a fair old battle, and then to put him in your bag and have the cray bake when you got home. You know, have the barbecue, boiling up the crayfish and crayfish sandwiches, whatever else. But it was that with a mate, going into the water, using the boat or sometimes off the rocks to catch crayfish and abalone, and having, you know, doing the whole abalone stuff. That, you know, the ritual of bringing the catch home, cooking the crayfish, and then with the abalone, shucking the abalone and cleaning them up and bashing them with the hammer to get them soft, and then frying them, and then just eating them out of the fry pan. All those sort of things were just unbelievable. For a bloke coming from a city like Liverpool, to be doing that was just amazing. And it was the hunter-gatherer stuff. And I still get a huge kick out of it. But I've given away potting for crayfish. And I've given away most of my diving for crayfish on air. If I want to catch a crayfish now, I'm going to catch it on a snorkel. And then it's a real test of me against the crayfish. We've got to go down, you've got to hold your breath for longer than he can to pull them out of the hole. And I just don't pot anymore. As you come in, you see my pot sitting under the veranda. I haven't had them in the water for 2 or 3 years. I'm just giving them a break. I mean, they've got enough against them without me still doing that. And I used to give all my crayfish, well, the bulk of my crayfish away. I don't do that anymore. I just don't catch them and leave them there. I just think they're going to really suffer with the things that are happening in the environment, with the urchins coming, the long-spine sea urchins coming. And when they come, they just wander over the bottom and they turn what was a pristine underwater forest, you know. And it was always macrocystis, kelps, and great forest solid going from the bottom to the surface and trailing out on the surface above you. And you watch your bubbles going through the seaweed. Well, it's all gone, and you get down there now where the urchins are well established. And it's like someone's been grazing too many sheep in a paddock. There is just nothing. The rocks are bare. And you can see them when they first arrive. I've taken photographs when they first start to arrive, the urchins. You'll see sponges cupped and half eaten. And then you'll see little stalks of kelp, and that's it. And the rest, and they've eaten the stalk, and the rest just washed away. And it really worries me, you know, with the crayfish. When they come as larvae, they float through the water column, and they come and they meet the kelp. And they climb down the kelp and they establish themselves in the rocks. Well, they're just going to be drifting past our coast, and goodness knows where they'll end up, because there's no kelp for them to hook onto and come down. And we've been working on a couple of little patches where we're trying to remove the urchins. And to go back to those little patches where we keep removing the urchins and be followed around by the fish, because when we go there we spike the urchins, and particularly the leather jackets and a lot of the parrotfish and the wrasse. They come and they follow you, and as you're breaking the urchins up, they're coming and eating. As the urchins break, they're coming in and eating the urchins. But wherever you are then and you're doing that, the sponges are still there, and some of the tiny little sponges that you see when you get down on the bottom, you have to really look closely. And some the coralline algae, and some of the green seaweeds are down there. It's just magnificent. But then you go where the urchins are really established, and it is just bare rock with a bit of slime on it. We dived, one of the saddest ones was diving a rock called Bell's Reef, which is just off Round Hill, which is Genera Beach, and it's a rock a bit like a mini Ayers rock, and it just comes up off the bottom. It's in 30 odd metres of water, and it's got a bit of bouldery stuff around it, and it used to be a great dive, and you go there and it's just a magnificent dive with kelp coming up the side, and a good place for crayfish. And that last dive I had on there was one piece of a clonia weed sitting on the top like a flag, just one piece just waving in. And I reckon if I went now there would be nothing. It would just look like Ayers rock. There would be no forest on it, no kelp forest on it. It would be a barren, and they call them urchin barrens, and rightly so. And how the cray are going to survive, and how the abalone industry is going to survive when the undersea marine environment is as denuded of food for the crayfish, or shelter for the crayfish and food for the abalone. I don't know how it's going to go, so I'll give them a bit of a break. I don't want to be part of it anymore. Yeah. A lot of people bemoaning the fishing in particular, about how bad it is and the way it used to be. I'm actually finding a lot of the fishing incredibly good. Some of it is a worry because I'm targeting species, particularly yellowtail kingfish, that were never here once upon a time. And it took me 4 years to catch my first one. I had people catch them in my boat. I'd been in other boats with people catching them. I'd lost them at the net and got very annoyed. The last 5 trips I've had targeting kingfish, I've caught kingfish every time. I've bagged out twice. So I'm finding fishing pretty exceptional. In George's Bay, and netting was stopped, and the fishing is just improving. Hand over fist, every year it gets better. We're getting new species. Those kingfish coming into the bay, never did. We're getting King George whiting in the bay. We never did get them in numbers. Once upon a time, if you caught a big salmon, it was unusual. Now the schools of salmon are coming into the bay and staying in the bay. Once, a fisherman would have just run a net around the whole school, pulled it in and used it for craybait for the season. Can't do that anymore, so the fishing is fantastic. We've got a sewage treatment plant, so the problems we're having with the seagrass dying has disappeared. The seagrass is re-establishing itself. The garfish are incredible. The whole food chain is working absolutely beautifully in our bay. And so some people would moan about, oh, it was like this when I was a lad. I actually think it's better now in the bay than when I first came. It's different outside in the ocean than when I first was here. I think a lot of the technology and the advances that we're making in the way we fish are making a massive difference. I know the gear that I'm using is better, but also the attitudes of people. People are returning fish to the ocean. When I first came, whatever was caught was taken home. Now people will take 4 or 5 fish and they will return. They will fish on, but they will return the bulk fish. And people don't demur it. It's just not a worry anymore. Even some of the older fellas I go fishing with, oh, we've got enough now, we'll keep going, we'll put a few back. We caught 20 kingfish, which is unheard of. We're only allowed to take 5 each. We did that. All the kingfish kept going back. That never would have happened 10 years ago. People, whatever you caught, you took home. People are not worried about bag limits. They understand the need for bag limits. They understand the need for possessionals. There are 2 or 3 people, and some of those people are commercial people. Okay, some of those people are recreation people. There are people who just can't help themselves. They'll go and fish the edge of the reserve because that's where the big cray are being put to eat these urchins. And so commercial guys, who this is actually benefit these commercial fishermen, they will still set 30 pots on the edge of the reserve where they put these big crayfish. I don't understand that. Most people are fantastic and are happy to have the support of the fisheries or whatever else and the rules put in place. But you just get this odd person who just does the wrong thing. The person who does, even though no one else has been netting for years, they will run a net around the prawns in Grant's Lagoon, and they will have 20 kilos of prawns in a bath at home that will then go rotten. I don't understand that, but most people are doing the right thing. There's a huge attitudinal change into people putting the fish back home and taking what they need for their own use. I've been talking with kids that I've been teaching. I've been talking with them for 10 years about global warming and about what it means. And it is easy for them to see. They see the similar changes that I see. Their dads catch the different fish. You know, people are swimming later in the year. People are starting to notice it. I think the greatest threat to the marine environment here will be environmental changes that are beyond our local control. If I wanted to give a message to people who are here in the local area, it would be just think about what you're doing. Just become aware, become informed, become educated in this area. You know, fish for the future. Think about the environment in which you're walking into. Don't walk your dog here. If you've got some rubbish, take it home. Don't forget all your rules that you'd apply in your own yard when you come down here. If I went and took a motorbike and raced it around your yard all weekend, you'd get annoyed. So if I had my boat and I revved it like mad in your pond, you get annoyed too. Just have a bit of a think, you know, when you come down here, think about why you're coming down here and preserving the values that are here that you treasure and want to come and see. Just have a bit of a think about it. It's the Great Abalone Bake Off. What an event that was. It's something that will never happen again. A whole bunch of us got together and gave away 750 kilos of abalone for nothing. A whole bunch of blokes will get together, catch as many abalone as you can, cook it up for everybody, invite them to come down and eat it. But sadly things have moved on and the abalone council aren't very happy about it. There's a disease in the abalone and so we can't go and get them and move them around. But it was a real measure of the community and of the culture in Binlong Bay and the Bay of Fires. Let's go and have a fish, go and have a dive, catch a few abalone and then come back and have a good time. We'll share amongst you, we'll all have a bite of abalone. And not just the rich buggers can do it, we'll all do it. That will be it for me. Yeah. We have a great place here on the coast. We need to look after it, we need to protect it, we treasure it.